Good evening, everyone. I'm Scott Lambert, Chairman of the Board, and I'd like to call to order the March 12th, 2025 East Whiteland Township Board of Supervisors meeting. Please stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to introduce our attendees at the table here. To my far left is Steve Brown, manager, and on my immediate left is Bernadette Kearney, our solicitor. On my immediate right is Vice Chair Rich Orlo and Supervisor Peter Fixler at the far end. Some meeting decorum points, if I could mention tonight, is the meeting is being recorded. Residents will have the opportunity to comment after each agenda item and after it is discussed by the board and the staff. And any non-agenda items can be brought up and discussed during the public comment section at number 8. And as you're entering the meeting, whether on Zoom or live here, please introduce yourself and provide your address before you speak. Executive sessions were held on February 18th at 4:30, February 26th at 1 o'clock, and today on March 12th at 4:30, in which we discussed legal, personnel, and real estate issues. We'll start off with Catherine Ricardo regarding any updates on the grant award. Once she gets plugged in.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. There's no new grant awards for this month, but there was a new application for the Green Light Go program. This is for Route 30 and 401 improvements to that traffic signal. It'll include pedestrian upgrades, new mast arm, new controller, and battery backup for a total project cost of approximately $240,000. The township's match is 20% of that, which is about $48,000. So that application's in, and we'll just await an award decision.
Thanks. And I will add to that. Last month we talked about the negative impact on Trump's executive orders and the delay on our grants that we were expecting. So I have an update on that. That's a little more positive. We asked our consultants to meet with Senator McCormick and Senator Fetterman's staff on February 20th down in Washington and provide them with an overview of the East Whiteland Township's $3 million congressionally directed spending request that was submitted with high regards and vetted by Chrissy Houlihan. And that was included in the 2025 appropriations process. This award is going to be dependent upon passage of the federal budget. So we're still hung up at that particular area, and currently the House and Senate are still negotiating and have yet to pass the budget. But that's where we are at this point in time on that. Also, additionally, I wanted to assure you that we have already $5,171,308 awarded for Route 30 improvements, and those dollars are secured as of right now. We'll see. We have an additional almost $9 million for a trail, Chester Valley Trail Award under the same scenario. But those funds appear to be secure at this point in time. So that's all positive. Moving on, Larry, you want to give us an update on our upcoming activities in the park and rec?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been a very busy time for Parks and Recreation. Happy to say we opened our summer camp registration for 2025 about a week ago last Monday. It's currently open for residents, and our camp is taking place at Katie Markley. I'm happy to finally report that. For non-residents of the township, outside the township, you can start registering on Friday, April 4th. For anybody who's interested, there are scholarships available for summer camp, and that is available for residents only. A few weeks ago, we had our gift card bingo event. It was a huge success. We had about 150 people there. It was at the Great Valley Community Organization. Through everybody coming and the registration fees, we were able to raise over $2,000 for Parks and Recreation programming and events throughout the year. And want to give a huge shout out to all the sponsors, as Zach pulled up. Thank you, Zach. General Warren, in Wegmans, GDCL were kind of our main big sponsors. T-Mac, People's Light, Chicken and Pete's, Pinball Gallery, Giant, Taco Mart, Tiffin, Malvern Library, Grand Slam, and Chick-fil-A. All great community partners, businesses within the township. They were awesome in their support, and I'm happy to have them as partners for this event, and hopefully more down the line. Moving on to future events, our most pressing and upcoming event is that Chester County Renaissance Fair. We are hosting the first ever Renaissance Fair in the county that I'm aware of. It's a free event for all to attend. It's going to be on Saturday, March 29th. I'm very excited, very proud of this and getting this together. There's going to be 3 main performers throughout the day, kind of daring danger acts, magicians, fire performers, a 40-foot long Viking ship. There's going to be food and alcohol and meat available for purchase, as well as some amazing local artisans and vendors at this event. Costumes are encouraged, as in most Renaissance fairs, but the point of this is to kind of just bring that sort of Renaissance fair feeling and ambiance to our backyard here in East Whiteland and Chester County. So I'm very excited about it, and it's coming up very soon in a couple of weeks, and I hope everyone who's on here can make it. Finally, well, not finally, there's a lot of stuff going on. We have our egg hunt event happening once again at Immaculata University. This is going to be on Saturday, April 19th, 10 to 12. And Immaculata has been very supportive in us bringing that program back to their lands and utilizing their amazing space. Kind of looking a little more forward, our summer concert series, planning for that is in full swing. While I'm not able to reveal any acts yet, I am very excited about all of them, and it's shaping up to be an even bigger summer than last year. Those dates are Wednesdays, the third Wednesday of every month, May 21st, June 18th, July 16th, and August 20th. And then finally, we are partnering with Shakespeare in Clark Park, group from Philadelphia who presents Shakespeare plays in public spaces. They are bringing production here at East Whiteland Township to Valley Creek Park on Friday, June 6th, and that's going to be All's Well That Ends Well, and they're a fantastic group. Their productions are top-notch, and I'm really excited to start getting some performances in theater out to the public in these spaces that we have there, just really built to utilize that kind of stuff. And that's everything that's happening in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Moving on to the Sidley Road and Mill Lane Trail update presentation. I'll let Catherine take over this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Township's design consultant is here this evening to give a brief project update. Chris Stanford's here from Michael Baker International to present an update to the board as to where we are with final design on this project.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Yeah, I'm here to give you an update on where we are with design on the trail project along Sidley and Mill Lane. Next. So first, just an overview. This is a about 3/4 mile walking and biking connection from the Sidley Ashlawn area off of Moores Road to connect to the Chester Valley Trail. It basically goes through the St. Gobain property using the alignment of the existing mulch trail, if you're familiar with that existing walking trail that's there today. Comes out to Mill Lane, and then we'll be transitioning onto a on-road system that I'll talk about here in a minute. Next. So what I'll do here is just sort of walk through, zoom in on different parts of the project and just sort of hit some of the highlights of the improvements that are planned right now. Starting at the intersection of Ashlawn and Moores Road, we'll have new ADA ramps and new crosswalks there to connect the neighborhood to the new trail system. What we're proposing is a 10-foot wide paved shared use path for walking and bicycling. Again, generally on the location of the existing mulch trail that's through the St. Gobain property. We also have new ADA ramps and crosswalks at the intersection of Sidley and Moores Road. Next. Again, following that mulch trail that exists today through the St. Gobain property, we're going to formalize the crosswalk that's at their driveway that's near Lap Road with signage and pavement markings, and then work our way over towards the wooded section of Mill Lane. Next. So as you may know, there's a wooded section of this property that's parallel to Mill Lane, and we've been working with the staff and the adjacent property owners to be very sensitive to the trees in that area, trying to minimize removal and any kind of impacts from the trail construction. What's shown here is the mulch path that exists today is shown in yellow there, and we just wanted to highlight that the new trail there that's shown in gray is been revised basically from the mulch location to really minimize the impact on the trees and the natural environment there. So been very careful to work that through that area as in a sensitive manner as possible to minimize the tree removal. The other technique we're using is a root protection detail that's shown there in the bottom right, where we're basically not disturbing the existing ground. We're actually putting clean stone and geotextile material on top of the existing terrain and then building the trail above that. So we're not doing excavation and removing roots of any of the trees there, trying to maintain all the trees as much as possible. And the other thing that we'll do is narrow the trail down to 8 feet, which is the minimum by the standards that's allowed to, again, minimize any impacts on the trees through that area. Next. So now we're going to make a transition from an off-road shared use path to a combination of sidewalk improvements and bike lanes, buffered bike lanes on Mill Lane. This is basically being done to minimize any changes to the bridge structure that's over Route 202, which would be very costly and time-consuming to work with PennDOT to make any modifications to that bridge. So there's enough room on that structure to do a combination of bike lanes, buffering, and then new 4 feet to 5 foot wide sidewalk. The other thing that's going on here is, as you probably know, the Knickerbocker development there, where it indicates a dirt path on this graphic. They've built a paved emergency access road as well as a trail connection down to Mill Lane. So with this new configuration and the new crossing that we're putting in where that trail intersects Mill Lane, they'll have access and a safe crossing over to the off-road trail. Next slide. This is a cross-section of what that part of the roadway will look like. Right now, there are 12-foot lanes and 6-foot shoulders on that roadway. So what we're going to do is reconfigure the roadway to 11-foot lanes and with a 5-foot bike lanes on the outside where the shoulders are today. And then we'll have 2 feet extra for a painted buffer between the travel lanes and the bike lanes. And you also can see on the right side of the image that we'll be constructing sidewalk that's elevated with about 8 inches off the existing roadway with concrete curb. Next. So this is an image of what the existing conditions are, where this sort of transition area will be, with the Knickerbocker roadway coming in on the right side there, at the end of the guide rail where the fencing is. And next, this is a rendering of what the new crossing would look like. We're incorporating a new signalized feature called a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. I believe there's another one of these in the township already. It's basically a user-activated strobe light that is indicate, it comes on when a trail user hits the pedestrian push button, and then it turns off after the trail users cross over. You can see the bike lane markings as well as the painted buffer and the new crosswalk there. And then see on the right is the yellow is sort of indicating that trail connection to the Knickerbocker trail. And then on the left, you see the yellow, which would be the off-road trail connection, and the new sidewalk that'll be constructed there. We'll be obviously making a break in the guide rail, so the trail will be located behind the guide rail through that wooded area up towards St. Gobain.
Got a question for you.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
not advocating it, but I'm just curious. Would this road and this project allow for a speed table on both sides of the white line?
That could be something we could think about. A raised crosswalk, basically. I mean, it's basically a speed bump, with a crosswalk
Yeah.
on top of it.
A mini speed bump.
Yeah. That could be.
I learned that about 4 years ago working on Carroll Lane. So I sound like I know what I'm talking about. But anyway,
that could be an interesting traffic calming element.
I'm just asking it. I don't know if we really need it, if there's going to be that much, but just a question. And that way our fire trucks wouldn't be impacted either because of the table.
Yeah, that could be something we could consider if that's something the township is interested in. It's a
crossing lights, it'll be one of the crossing. There is no detection of vehicles coming to set it off.
Correct. That's the way it operates right now. I mean, there is technology that we could use to do that, but we're a little bit concerned about, say a bicyclist is going straight, he's not getting off the road, he's just continuing on Mill Lane. That might trip it, and incidentally, anything like that could be an issue. So I think at this point we're going to be recommending just a user-activated push button for this location. Next. So just continuing on to finish up the alignment, again, we'll be adding sidewalk along Mill Lane, doing a little bit of widening down towards 401, where the roadway kind of, right now it kind of pinches in at an existing bridge. So we'll be looking to widen that structure, or in that area of that structure where the bridge crosses over Valley Creek. Right now, we're doing an evaluation of that structure to see if there's any improvements that need to happen there as part of the project.
I have another question.
Sir.
Were you looking at all possibly on the east side across from the fire station, putting the path on that side rather than on the fire side, on the western side?
We had not looked at placing it on the east side, mostly because of right-of-way constraints and some drainage features that are existing out there today. The fire company property as well as the property behind it are both owned by the township.
Right.
So we were trying to minimize any kind of additional right-of-way acquisition as part of the project. And there is, it's a bit tight on the fire company property, but I believe that we can squeeze it in there with, again, narrowing it down to 8 feet. And some creative grading in there and some drainage improvements, because I know there's a lot of drainage features in there that are associated with the roadway, and there's like a rain garden stormwater feature down at that corner, as well as some minor swales around that edge of the property. But I believe we can make it work.
I mean, on the eastern side, nothing will ever get built over there because of that shell. So
So you know, too, this was presented to the fire company on Monday night, so they're being kept up to speed, and they're aware, and they gave good comments.
Are they okay with it? Are they
I say so.
semi?
Hasn't gone to the members. That's right.
I think what we basically, the way we left it was that we work very closely with the department. We'll come back to them and show them exactly what we're doing before we finalize everything and make sure they're on board. Just continuing on here, we are going to be improving the intersection at Mill Lane and 401 with pedestrian crosswalks at 2 locations there, as well as countdown timers and push buttons to allow for safe crossings to continue the trail, as well as to get over to the other property that's on the, I guess, say the northwest corner of that intersection, which has a basin on it and some walking trails. Yeah, again, as mentioned, we're looking at a side path along the fire company property, likely with fencing along that whole edge, just due to the topography there and the retaining wall at the back edge of the fire company property. Next. So just to kind of give you an overview where we are right now, we're basically about 50% done with the final design. We're working with the township and working through the PennDOT process for approvals. As you know, the township got federal funding for this project, so we're required to go through PennDOT for all our approvals on this project. So the next few steps that we're going to be doing is we'll be requesting the township to review and approve the signal modifications, as well as the rectangular rapid flashing beacon signal that were proposed. One item that's on the agenda here for the township is to approve an amendment for some additional underwater inspection at that structure that I mentioned of Mill Lane over Valley Creek. We did above ground inspection, but there's some signs that there might be some underwater issues that need to be addressed. So it was beyond the scope of the above ground inspection. So we're asking the township to authorize a specialized underwater inspection, but with like scuba divers because of the depth of the water there. We're continuing on with our environmental. Yes.
Is that something that has to be done for this project, or is that something that could be punted down the road?
I'll say it depends. We're still evaluating what we need to do with the top of the structure as far as the minor widening we need to do to fit the sidewalk and the bike lanes in there. So we may get into some modifications of the structure. Our only concern is if we identify an issue, we think we'd like to, make sure that the township knows what's going on there. We just don't want to leave you with a question mark. But it's a possibility, that'd be something we could talk with the township about. I mean, so if we get into modifying the structure at all, it would make sense to make some improvements now as part of the project. Maybe you can utilize some of the federal funding for it if it's not too expensive. Or you could table it for later if it's your decision.
Thank you.
Yep. Again, we're moving on with utility coordination, and then again, we'll be continuing with the PennDOT permitting and county conservation and any DEP permits. Again, if we get into any stream work related to that structure, those are some of the next steps. As far as schedule, we're hoping to get our PennDOT environmental approval in late 25. Again, we'll move on with any kind of DEP permitting in 25 and hopefully acquire that by early 26. We're anticipating in early 26, about a year from now, having all our final plans and approvals in place and looking to advertise the project and get contractor bids through PennDOT in mid 26 and hopefully start construction the end of fall of 26. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions if there are any.
We're close to breaking ground, considering of how long ago it started.
We're closer.
Closer.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's great to get the federal funding, but the process takes a while. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Donna, no questions from the public? Anyone in the audience? Martin, if you'd come up.
Yes. Good evening. Okay. Thank you. Yes. Good evening. My name is Martin Lutz, 4 Lap Road.
Chris showed an exhibit. I don't know if you can show the exhibit at where the Knickerbocker Trail hits Mill Lane. I'd like to second what Scott mentioned earlier about basically traffic calming measures. I live in the northeast corner. I own 11 acres there. My son and I, we maintain the property along Mill and the service road there. And one thing we've noticed in the last few years is the excessive traffic and speed, in part because people are using Mill, Lap Road, Mill, Wilburdale, et cetera, as a shortcut to get to the easy path ramps. So I really believe we need additional traffic calming measures, particularly when you're traveling south of Mill Lane around that curve. It's a vertical curve. The speeding, it's a short distance to stop. In the same way, if you're going north of Mill, coming up over the 202 bridge, people just speed right over there and immediately you're at that crosswalk. So again, I just support the need for, I think we need more than a push button when somebody crosses the path. Second, if we could have the exhibit that shows the buffer along Mill Lane. Back in September 2023, I had a meeting on site with Chris, Catherine, Zach, and Larry. And again, I truly appreciate that meeting because the purpose of the meeting was to find the best path without impacting all the deciduous trees there. Because there is a landscape plan, a township approved landscape plan for that buffer area, which is 50 foot wide. And it consists of all deciduous trees. So the whole purpose of that was to minimize, find a path that would minimize the impact on deciduous trees, many of which are mature. So with that, I have a question about how many, at this point in time, how many trees would be removed from that buffer area? Chris, do you have an idea?
Yeah, I think we had that meeting, Martin, right? And and you and your son, right, who are very kind to sort of help us identify the ones you thought were maybe at the end of their life and that could go. I think there's about half a dozen, including the ones that you were mentioning that you recommended we remove. So they were probably in that range, about half a dozen to,
Most of
10.
which are the half-dead trees that we
Yeah, there were quite a few ash trees, I believe, in there, and others that I think we all came to the conclusion that were probably at the end of the life.
Yeah, in regard to the trees, I might mention the existing wood chip path that's there now is unusual. You can't walk it because, again, many of those dead trees that we're talking about fell. They're all dead ash trees. So there are 3 or 4 on the path that maybe you want to tend to on the wood chip path. The other thing I wanted to mention is, aside from an approved landscape plan, buffer plan there is also an approved landscape plan for screening. And I bring this up within the context of landscaping for the trail, which is addressed somewhat in our ordinance. It doesn't show there, but that wiggly line, which is a stream, to the south, or to the bottom there of the diagram, it's mostly all an off-street parking area for St. Caban. And when you walk that area now, what you see is a screening area that hasn't been attended to. It's mostly dead trees, fallen trees, overhang, overgrowth, and it hasn't been maintained. And likewise, the township has not really been enforcing that landscape plan, which I think it should. So I bring this up within the context that if we enforce that landscape plan for screening along that parking lot, we not only improve the view from Mill Lane, but we improve the view from the trail itself. It would lend itself to the aesthetics and just the beauty, the nature of the area. So it's something for the board to consider. And that's basically it. Could these exhibits be posted to the township website? Okay, great. Thank you.
Is the traffic calming measures mentioned within PennDOT jurisdiction or township or both? Any idea? It's a township road, right? But it's a PennDOT project with PennDOT money.
I think you hit it on the head, it's both. Like the rest of the project, you're gonna own and maintain the rest of the project. That's, again, a requirement of the federal funding. I would think if you were to, request that as part of the project and agree to own and maintain it on your roadway, I think they would accept it as long as we follow their standards for installation of the raised crosswalk.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to have that. Having been a bike rider on that road, it's not the safest. So,
And it would go to Mr. Martin's concerns about speeding and other things on that roadway as well. So I think that might be a good add to the project.
I think great comments and something that we'll get together and maybe include our traffic engineer in that conversation
Yeah,
as
good
well.
idea.
So it's something we can follow up with after the meeting.
Chris Yeager, any thoughts on that speed table, calming noise?
I agree with that. I think they're especially in that location. Losing my skirt here. I agree with it. I think in that location, everything Mr. Lutz is saying he's correct about. I mean, he lives there and he sees it every day. So, and it is, Mr. Orlo rides a bike there, so it tightens up there. And when I first saw this pop up, I was thinking that other people were coming right over that bridge, going north. So it's going to be something that, a table I like, because a table, like you said, the fire department can use it, police cars, if they have to speed, it's not going to take out their.
Are we gonna have to do any traffic studies, speed studies, hit our 85% of the average speed or not? Do you think?
Oh yeah, we would do all of that, and we could do most, so we have the equipment to do most of that ourselves.
But are we required to do that if we're gonna install the table?
We have a policy, and we should follow it for ourselves, I think, if we're gonna make other people. So yeah, I would say it's not that big of a deal. So when you were talking about the other one, there were a lot of residents involved and that, surveys and things of that nature. This is not like that. It's probably just a study.
Okay, all right. Any other comments? All right. Thanks, Chris. Moving on to board motions and resolutions, I will turn this portion over to Catherine again.
Thank you. This matter is in relation to an ongoing project that the township has been undertaking with our neighbors Charlestown Township. This is for improvements at the Sidley and Phoenixville Pike intersection to install left turning movements and ADA and pedestrian improvements, some signal upgrades as well to the intersection. That's a shared project between both communities. There are 2 temporary easements for construction that are needed from the adjacent property owners at 286 and 288 Phoenixville Pike. I just want to emphasize that they are temporary for construction only. All of the permanent improvements for this project are within the existing road right-of-way. And the township has been in conversations with the affected property owners, including these 2. And at this time, Charlestown Township is taking the lead on this project and is ready to put it out to bid. We do not yet have signed easement documents from those property owners, though we have engaged in multiple conversations with them and offered certain items, but unfortunately at this time, they have not signed those easements and returned them to the township. So the action that the board has before it this evening would be for an authorization for the township solicitor to file a condemnation proceeding. If necessary, Bernadette can explain further, there is a process where we would continue to try to negotiate with them up till filing that, and also to get appraisals for those temporary easements because there is compensation associated with this. Does the board have any questions regarding that?
One thing I'll just remind people, when this project came up last year, when Chris Williams was here, one of the things that we had wanted to do is complete this project along Phoenixville Pike before the September school season starts up with the buses. And so we had to fast track a few things to get it to this point in time so that the work would be done during the summer at the slow time. There wouldn't be that many buses involved. So it's imperative that we get these documents taken care of and begin the work so that we can meet those deadlines and not mess up traffic and add more congestion along there. And I do know Catherine and John have made some strong efforts to reach out to the residents to try to work with them. And so that I appreciate you both getting involved with that.
Keep going forward.
Okay, there's no questions then? Okay. All right. Then can we have a motion? Peter?
Sure. I'll make a motion to authorize our township solicitor to file condemnation proceedings if necessary to obtain easements for properties 286 and 288 Phoenixville Pike. Is that correct, Bernadette?
And the appraisals.
Obtain appraisals for easements at 286 and 288 Phoenixville Pike to make improvements to the private properties associated with Sidley/Phoenixville Pike intersection.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And
Aye.
passes 3-0.
And again, we'll reach out before any eminent domain proceedings are filed.
Donna, I don't know if it's impacting us at all, but the mic up there is on.
It's actually not.
Okay, I see the red. I thought it was impacting. Okay, moving on to public hearings. Bernadette, I will hand it over to you regarding the open space bond ordinance.
Yes.
I know Catherine, you're going to be involved as well.
And this is a public hearing. Notice is hereby given that on Wednesday, March 12th, at the East Whiteland Township Municipal Building, the Board of Supervisors will hold a public hearing at which it will consider an ordinance to provide funds for the purpose of financing, 1, some or all the costs of acquisition of 1469 Moorstein Road, Westchester, PA, for preservation of open space and other conservation purposes, including reimbursement of funds expended for such acquisition and other acquisitions for such purposes. 2, funding of a capitalized interest fund. And 3, paying the costs of issuing the bonds. And the township may enact the ordinance at its public meeting following this public hearing. The proposed ordinance provides an authorization for the township to incur non-electoral debt pursuant to the Local Government Unit Debt Act of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania through the issuance of its general obligation bonds, series of 2025, in an aggregate principal amount currently estimated not to exceed $17 million for the purpose of providing funds for the above described project. So I'm going to mark 2 exhibits. One is the proof of publication for the hearing this evening, the public hearing, public meeting on the proposed ordinance. And That will be B1. B2 will be the actual proposed ordinance with exhibits attached. And we do have Catherine Ricardo, the Assistant Township Manager, who may add some more to this public hearing, as well as Ed Murray, the Managing Director of Stifel Public Finance, and Helen Espenshade, the attorney, the bond attorney from Lamb Mackerlane, who's also present. So at this point, I don't know if the board wants to ask questions or we want to turn it over to Catherine or Ed.
I guess we're still following the discussions earlier. Just trying to figure out the parameters in the event that we didn't want to engage in the entire full $15 million bond. The parameters in terms of the options, and I don't think that we're all totally clear on the parameters of that. And I don't know if there's a way to get that clarified in writing, or or we have another discussion pertaining to it. I know it's very involved, and it's very very dry.
No, listen, the bond counsel's here.
So you're correct. I mean, your bond counsel's here, so we can have this discussion, again. I don't have any problem with that. If you'd like me to, I'll just quickly, go through the, some of the features of the ordinance and some of the things, and then we can kind of drill down on the other pieces. First off, you are going to consider the ordinance. We call the ordinance, it's funding, what was approved at the referendum. So you've imposed the taxes to pay for this debt service. So it shouldn't have a general fund impact or an impact on your millage rates because it's approved by the referendum to begin with. During this process, we create an investor document, an official statement, and we go to the rating agencies and we ask the rating agencies to review the credit of the township. And just as a matter of disclosure, the Moody's Investor Service is that rating agent, and they came back and they've upgraded the township to AAA. So you're now the highest municipal rating that you can possibly be. The rating agencies sought so highly of the way that you all manage your affairs, the conservative nature of the budgeting, the management of the fiscal affairs over many years, your staff, the way the staff administers to it, all were really, really taken positively by Moody's. There are very, very few municipalities that get the AAA rating. Your rating's higher. You might think this is good or bad, but your rating's now higher than the United States of America, who is not AAA. So you have that going for you.
We still can't print money though, right?
It is true.
Just
there
clarifying,
are some
because you
so you
don't know
can't print
what
money
people-
and you've got a higher rating. It's
Don't
even
know
more
what people
impressive.
think. Okay.
Yes, you have to.
David, you haven't told them about the printer we just got?
Yeah.
No.
There's a
Sorry.
new one in the back. So with that, the ordinance itself has, 17 pieces. It authorizes you to pledge your general obligation taxing power. It authorizes the open space program. It authorizes the uses, all those things. And that's what we're going to ask you to consider. Helen is here, but if you have any questions, so I guess that's first. The question as to, amount, as I, said earlier, when you enter into a bond issue, you're supposed to have a reasonable expectation that you're going to spend 85% in 3 years. Doesn't mean that you have to, you're just supposed to expect it. And your open space committee has come up with project list that looks like it exceeds 85 million. So how it's actually spent, I don't get into per se, especially after it's been approved by referendum and you've imposed the taxes and the debt service. Now we're trying to produce a bond issue which creates exactly 15 million that pays for the cost of the issuance of the bonds and is at the lowest possible interest rate. And can you afford the debt service? And the answer is yes, you're going to collect more in tax than you're going to for the debt service. So $15 million was the number that we were asked to solve for. So we've kind of let the investing public know 15 million. We've put 15 million on the investor documents, and this is kind of what we've gone through. We're going to produce a $15 million proceeds for the open space projects that'll occur over some time. Now, 15 million, as I said, is, there's a cutoff. $10 million is what's called bank qualified. If you're $10 million and lower, you'll be able to call these bonds in 5 years, meaning you can redeem them. You're the only ones that would be able to call the bonds. The investors can't. You hold the only option. So if interest rates go down, we could refund the bonds, right? If it's over 10 million, it's non-bank qualified, and the call is between really 7.5 and 8 years. So it's a slightly longer period of time before you'll have the option, if interest rates come down, for you to call the bonds. Right, so there's a difference between spending the money and then calling the bonds if interest rates have risen, nothing happens. We won't refund the bonds. Investors can't ask for a higher coupon, only you can do that. So we'd only refund them if they came down.
And there's no penalty if we call the bonds.
No penalty at all. No, you're called at par, no penalty.
No par, at par. And likewise, if the bank calls it in, also at par?
Par.
All right.
Yep. All right.
Knowing these facts and knowing the date that's quickly coming upon us for the whole reason for this bond purchase and open space referendum is the sale of the purchase of the Schiffer property, and that's coming due very soon. So my thoughts are, with the board to decide tonight and pass, or what would we say? Accept a certain amount of bond we want to get, because the date's going to pass us by if we don't do this evening to purchase the Schiffer property. And that's what I'm kind of proposing. Do we want to do above 10 or at or above 10, or at or below 10?
Okay. We've had a good discussion. Thank you for coming here and answering all our questions, probably for the 5th time, but I appreciate it. And my thinking at the moment is to follow up on your and Moody's belief of our conservative nature at this township. I would suggest that we move forward or discuss a $10 million offering. As we purchase property, we're also going to have to maintain it and take care of it. I understand that a percentage of the annual tax can go towards that. So, right?
That's correct, yes,
right.
25%.
Right. So to me, this is kind of a middle ground where we can easily cover the $10 million in debt service, and there'll be some cushion to maintain the properties that we purchase. That's my middle ground, somewhat conservative thinking, to avoid going all the way day 1 to 15. We can always raise the additional 5. It'll be a little more fixed cost, but we can do it. If we go 10 and then 5, both of those bond issuances would then be subject to the 5-year period, neither the 8, right? Okay. Yeah. That's my thinking.
Just one question. Another 2 questions I've got. Is there Sorry. The question I've got, from your perspective, knowing what we're doing, is there any advantage of perhaps doing 7.5 million and 7.5 million, 2 separate bonds? is there any benefit that going that route? No.
There's not particular, actually, I would probably say it would be better to do 10. It's widely, responded to as bank qualified. We'll get more people to purchase the bonds at that $10 million entry point, just because we'll be able to term the bonds in a certain way that it'll be easier for bond buyers to purchase them. We'll get a better purchase price at 10 than really 7.5. It'll garner more interest. Now, again, if you said, I just don't feel comfortable with 10 as a matter of policy, that's different, but it would be easier to sell the bonds at 10.
Better rate if it's 15 million?
Possibly. I can't guarantee
Yeah.
it because every day you sell bonds. I mean, we're the largest bond underwriter in the country. We do a lot of bonds. It just really depends on that day. But if you're saying, 15, it's larger. So for instance, like a Vanguard doesn't come in to buy the bonds because their funds are so big. They want to buy bonds that are like Pennsylvania Turnpike, where there's liquidity, where there's a market for buying and selling. People that are going to buy these bonds, the bonds are going to go away. They're going to be separately managed accounts. They're going to be wealth managers that are buying them from high net worth individuals, people that want tax exempt income, but want the AAA credit. But these bonds are going to, in all likelihood, are going to be bought, and most of them are going to go away and not trade. They're just going to be in someone's account until they're called or they mature. So there's no velocity on them. So Vanguard and the bigger funds can't trade them. They can't come in and out of a fund because they don't trade freely. They're just going to go in someone's portfolio, and you won't see 90% of these again. So it's not going to be a big fund. It's going to be a wealth manager. It's going to be private wealth people that are going to buy these bonds, by and large. But do you start getting the bigger funds? Do you start getting the medium-sized funds to buy at 15? The answer is yes. But until I sell them, I just can't tell you on that day they're going to show up. Do they show up? Yes. But can I guarantee you that on that day they'll be ready to buy and participate and give you more investors on that day? Until I sell the bonds, I just can't do that.
From your financial underwriting that you folks did, do you see any problems with us going with the 10 million instead of the 15 that would alter the process or the underwriting or the issuance?
So I'm thinking about it since it's new.
Right.
From an SEC regulatory perspective, we have not released the preliminary official statement. If we go to less than 10, if we go to 10 million, then I have to put certain language in it that it is bank qualified. But I can put that language in it, and we can probably get that. Hopefully we can get that done tomorrow, because we want to release the preliminary official statement tomorrow night to be printed. Can I change the preliminary official statement to put in the bank qualification language that investors would need to see in that document? Can I get that done tomorrow? I think. But I got to talk to some compliance people, and I got to talk to some staff. And I just came from a conference. So I think the answer is yes. If not, it would be, we're trying to sell the bonds next Wednesday. At worst, it would be the Monday after. I delay the sale until, if I can't get it done, I need a certain amount of time to talk to investors, to hold those conference calls that we want to get out. If I can't get the investor document out tomorrow, then I would take the sale from next Wednesday to the Monday prior. So it would only be a 2 business day delay for me to go from 15 down to 10. Except for, I'm not your lawyer. It could be a
Thank
tax
you.
on it.
Good evening. I'm Helen Espenshea with Lamb Macker Lane. Pleased to be your bond counsel. As such, we were charged with drafting the ordinances before you for a maximum principal amount of $17 million. And I apologize for Ed and my kibitzing, but we actually were talking about, would there need to be changes to the ordinance? One thing that comes to mind is if you're going to reduce to 10 million for the purpose of achieving bank qualification, one of the IRS regulations requires that you designate the bonds and do that in your ordinance, which is not currently there. So you are able to make changes this evening. We have an obligation after, if you adopt an ordinance, a debt ordinance, under the Local Government Unit Debt Act, you're required to advertise the adoption of the ordinance, and you are permitted to make changes tonight to that ordinance, but that's a very significant change, and I would want to make sure that that's documented properly, the designation of because it's a certain section of the IRS code that governs those bonds, and I just don't want to jeopardize the savings that you would get by not doing it properly. So I think there's some thought to be given to that.
And then I'm going to turn to Bernadette and Catherine, one other question. In the event that we go with the 10 million, all right, and we are okay with the guidelines of IRS and so forth, and somewhere down the road we end up deciding that we want to go with the additional 5 million, all right? The existing ordinance that we have for the open space tax, I would assume we would need to make some adjustments to that, or would the existing ordinance be so broad that it would allow us to issue a second bond in the future, or do we have to start the bond process or the open space tax ordinance all over, or do we just do an amendment to the existing ordinance?
When you say open space tax ordinance, I just want to make sure that I understand your question, because there's been a few ordinances adopted in this process. So just briefly, so first there was a referendum ordinance that set the question on the ballot. Then you adopted 2 ordinances, one to set the real estate tax rate and one to set the EIT rate. And then you adopted an ordinance to form the open space committee. So of those 4, which one do you mean?
The first one, the broad one.
You wouldn't need to make any
We would
changes
not.
to that.
So it's broad
No.
enough that it would allow?
Yes.
Okay, that's
Yep.
so I
Mhm.
just want to know.
Yep.
So we've got the flexibility.
Just one more question, numbers wise. Say we do 10 million. We don't intend to raise more for another 2 years, 3 years, whatever. To the extent we have paid down principal of the 10 million, less than 10 million, does that increase the amount we can borrow on the second borrowing by the amount of principal that we have paid down on the first borrowing? Or are we limited at the 5
No, so
on the second?
you
or
can, as to the second one, once you've borrowed 10, it's a standalone transaction. You've borrowed 10 for open space. For us to borrow more, the only thing that constrains us will be the level of tax that comes in, right? So the 10 million, we'll have debt service. So let's say it's 780,000, right? And if you're collecting $1.5 million, we could do another 10 if you wanted to, or if you identified 20 million, we would go back and work with Catherine and say, okay, what's the total amount of tax? What's being collected? What debt service is against it? You've already said, and part of it can be used for maintaining. So if you take out maintenance and the debt service on the first series of bonds, the only thing that constrains you on the second series is the amount of tax that you're collecting. Yeah, I mean, you could, if you said, listen, we've got this great property and we want to borrow 20 million right away because we got a $20 million property. If you've got the tax, I'll do the bond issue.
And the Local Government Unit Debt Act requires that you borrow only within the debt limitations that are required, but you're well within that capacity.
No, I just wanted to check, Helen, If the Board of Supervisors were to vote tonight to adopt the ordinance with the suggested changes, once you check on that, you would need to let us know if we need another public meeting to do that change?
Particularly that designation of the bonds as bank qualified bonds.
So that would be the one thing I would be concerned about. We'd probably have to do this again in April if Helen looks into this and we have to do it again.
Or if we wanted to do this sooner, we'd have to have that meeting whenever we could get together, right?
And we would want to advertise that meeting
Yes.
again.
Yeah.
3 days in advance of the meeting. So you'd need that cushion.
So you would have to find out your timing, which is our timing.
Yes.
Right. And then once you learn that and confirm that, then we'll know at that moment whether we have to have another meeting right away, or this second meeting can happen, before you.
Within 3 days.
Honestly, I'd be
Okay.
most comfortable standing here tonight, although I am very willing to research it. I'd be most comfortable doing that
Right.
and amending the ordinance.
Right. Okay.
But that also bumps into the timeline that Ed's
Right,
describing, the schedule,
exactly,
the
yeah.
time,
That-
and he's already got the wheels turning on that process. So
Right.
he and I would need to talk about that as well.
Okay. I guess it's somewhat realistic to have a confirmed answer tomorrow.
That would be my goal, because I
Sure.
understand everything's well in
Yeah.
the works. So I would like to do that for you.
And if that's the case, then we would need another 3 days' notice before we hold our new meeting to finalize it.
Correct. Which may be workable in your schedule, but
It would
still, there's a
probably-
lot of work to get there.
It would probably push the 2-day delay from Wednesday to the next Monday, right?
At least.
Yeah.
I would probably say we're pushing the process out a week. I would probably
Right.
push the bond sale a week.
A week, okay. All right.
Because again, I won't be able to print unless I know it's going to be bank qualified. So I won't print the investor document and mail it until I have approval of an ordinance.
Okay.
So let's say Helen can get you the answer tomorrow. Then you're talking 3 days advertising. At best, you're talking another special meeting fully advertised for, let's say, next Wednesday.
Today's
Then-
Wednesday, right? Yeah. Thursday.
Let's say next Tuesday.
Right.
It doesn't matter from that side. Even if it's Tuesday, I don't want to sell bonds on a Thursday or a Friday, so I would push it to the next
To the
week.
next Monday, okay. So it would effectively a week later than what we're thinking right now.
Correct,
Okay. Monday to Monday.
correct,
Okay.
with the special meeting. As long as you're willing to come in next Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever a special meeting can be fully advertised and you can have a quorum.
Mhm.
If you do that next Wednesday, then I'll mail the documents to investors on Thursday, and I'd look to sell the bonds either the next Monday or Tuesday.
I'm in town.
We just have to give Helen time to get the
Yes,
ad,
yes,
to
yes.
get
That's
the
right.
answer and the ad in.
Yeah.
I think they only needed it the day before to advertise
The
it.
day before and
I
that
think
time keeps
noon.
changing. Noon, sometimes it's 2 o'clock, sometimes it's noon, but conservatively noon.
Okay.
I'm retired, so either day works.
So I think what I'm getting at is Helen, tomorrow's Thursday. So Helen would have to have the ad in by noon Thursday. I don't know if she's going to have the answer by tomorrow. You know what I'm saying?
No, I don't see, I'm sorry, I don't see that happening.
At best, it's noon Friday.
Understood.
Noon Friday is more likely. So
Then 3
Which
days.
would-
So then Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
So you could have a
But
special meeting
still, it could be
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Tuesday or Wednesday. It won't be Monday. Tuesday, Wednesday, you could have a special meeting with the change, with the amended ordinance, with the bank qualification language. I'll update the official statement in the investor documents. I'll get that all printed by next Wednesday or Thursday, and we'd sell the bonds the next Monday.
And Helen, I'm assuming you need a definitive 10 million commitment from the board tonight or 15, right? For you to do what you're doing tomorrow. right?
Well, I mean, you could adopt the ordinance as it is, but you do not have the bank qualification in there. So, and if you adopt a change to 10 million, you still don't have the bank qualification. So
You need the amendment.
I think the amendment really is probably going to be the most sure way to deal with the issue.
You didn't bring your computer and printer, huh?
No.
So, do you want them to pass the resolution and then amend it to 10 and put the bank qualification? Do you want them to take action on the current?
Yeah, I think
Then
that
amend
makes
it.
sense. Take action on this ordinance and then schedule a meeting for an amendment to this ordinance.
So approve the 15 million and then
Right.
do a little more research to determine moving it downward to 10 million.
Right.
Either next Tuesday or Wednesday is when we would vote on it. You okay with those times and all that? Okay, I think you've got a commitment from the three of us for that, so.
That's good.
No, we've got a commitment, so
Okay.
so I guess we'll go ahead unless you've got something else.
I just wanted to ask if anyone in the audience or online had questions, and then we could close out the public hearing if there's no other questions or comments. I'm sorry. I thought it was on. I apologize. I would just ask if anyone in the audience or online has any questions or comments. If not, we can close out the public hearing, back to the public meeting for the vote. I will just note that it is a roll call vote. We do have to have each of you vote separately. Anything online, Donna? No one online. No. Anyone in the audience? Okay. Then I will close out the public hearing. We'll go back to the public meeting, and we'll ask for a motion. And just again, we need a roll call vote.
Rich, would you like to make a motion?
Sure, and the motion would be, I make a motion to approve the ordinance. Ordinance 25 doesn't have a number there, to allow the issuance of one or more series of general obligation bonds in the aggregate principal amount currently estimated not to exceed, the ordinance says 17 million, so I have to say 17, right? Okay. Understanding that we'll be amending down to 10, we'll have a special meeting next week. If that's not supposed to be part of the motion, you can exclude it.
Not necessarily part of the motion.
Okay, all right, we'll do that separate, that's fine. Okay, okay, that's the motion.
Have a second?
I second.
And I guess, well, you need to do a roll call. So Peter, yay or nay?
My vote is yay.
Rich?
My vote is yay.
Scott Lambert? Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for going through that again.
As soon as you know, let us know whether it can be Tuesday or Wednesday, because we'll, sooner the better with us also. Thanks.
Okay, now if you think that was complicated, wait for this next one. John Neal, could you come forward on? Chris? Oh, I thought it was John.
There you go. So we sold the car on municipal bid. Well, it went for $5,600 for the 2018 car that we bought in 2017 with 100 and some thousand miles. So we're just asking for you to approve the sale or not.
I'll make a motion.
Yeah, I think it's motion to advertise, I think.
No, it's sold.
Sold.
To approve the sale.
Yeah, approved sale.
But it's underneath. Got it. Peter, you want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the sale of that fine Ford Taurus in the amount of $5,600.
Have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye,
Aye.
Thank you.
anytime. All right. Zach, could you lead us through the planning and the development section here?
I certainly can. So first item here is consideration to render a decision on the following development applications. It's Land Development 02-2020 for a flex building complex at 19 Backton Hill Road. This is a preliminary / final plan. It was discussed last month with the board briefly. Motion was made to authorize staff in the solicitor office to draft an approval resolution, which we've done. There are a number of sort of boilerplate and project-specific conditions, compliance with waiver, outstanding review comments, posting of security. There's language regarding future EDUs pending the aqua sale, traffic impact fee. There is an authorization for reserved parking, which is outlined in the review letters. So we're clarifying that within this, that is an approved arrangement. There are some conditions about easements for future pedestrian connections. And then there's a series of waivers which are either identical or very, very similar to the waivers that were granted for the previous plan in 2017. Happy to walk through as much or as little of that as you'd like. I believe the applicant's legal counsel is also here. So with that, if there's anything you'd like us to elaborate on, walk
Thank
through,
you.
we're happy to.
Hi. I'm here if you have any questions. Allison Czar on behalf of the applicant.
Are you selling a bond tonight?
I am not.
Are you buying?
Maybe in the future.
Maybe in the future, yeah. It's not offered yet.
It's not I thought this the letters on this look pretty clean, and I really have no questions personally.
Same. I have no questions.
Yeah, my only 2 cents is, you know, I love trees, and your project removes quite a few, but under the design of it, I understand, and it is what it is on this one, and you know, we want to help Workspace with their project, so I don't have any problems.
This is
At this
actually
point,
Backton Hill Road, but that's next, but I appreciate that.
What's that?
This is actually Backton Hill Road, but Workspace is next.
Okay,
We are removing some trees, but
I'm
that
off.
is-
I'm off on the wrong one here.
But we are removing some trees, but in this particular instance, this, as Zach alluded to, this was approved previously in 2017, and our stormwater and everything on the site works with the Great Valley Community Organization property to the north, which was built, so their stormwater actually drains through the site, and the stormwater basin is going to be located in a way that'll help control that stormwater as well, so.
If I read my agenda, yeah, I don't have any issues. Again, we've seen it, and I think it's,
Make a motion.
yeah, we'd like to make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion, I guess, to approve preliminary final land development. Is that correct, Bernadette?
Correct.
Yes. Just want to make sure. For land development project LD 022020 for the flex building complex at 19 Backton Hill Road.
Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Thank you.
and passes.
So next up is work, so I'll just take it.
Want to read my mind?
I don't want to interrupt.
Nobody wants to read your mind, Scott, sorry.
Hey.
All right, next item here is to review and consider authorizing the solicitor to draft a resolution of decision for the following applications. We are now on to the Land Development 09-2024 for Workspace Industrial Building at 5565 Valley Stream Parkway. This is a preliminary plan. to build sort of a general industrial building, to redevelop the existing office, I should say, as a general industrial building. The applicant team is here with their legal counsel, their engineer, and the representatives from Workspace as well.
So we were here last month to give a brief introduction of this project. As Zach mentioned, this would be a redevelopment of 5565 Valley Stream Parkway, which is currently improved with 2 office buildings that are currently vacant. The property would be consolidated and an approximately 86,000 square foot light industrial building would be developed on the site. This property is in the OBP district, and the OBP district permits a variety of light industrial uses. Again, this is not your heavy industrial district, so we're talking about processing, light manufacturing, pharma, R&D, testing, the things that are occurring in the corporate center today. And what we're showing on this plan includes what we would call, flex area for parking or loading. So I know it looks somewhat dramatic. We would not anticipate that all of the loading docks that are shown here or truck parking would actually be utilized. But the idea behind this, and we're only seeking preliminary plan approval, is to then put it out to market to find a specific tenant for the site, but show that flexibility on the site. The other thing I would note is that this site is not parked for a warehouse. So even though warehouse is permitted in the district, we are not proposing a warehouse use on the site. We are seeking several, and let me just back up. We do have 3 review letters. We have a review letter from Arrow dated December 26th, 2024, a review letter from Bowman dated January 17th, 2025, and a review letter from Land Concepts dated January 16th, 2025. We were before the Planning Commission and received a unanimous recommendation of approval from them, and post that meeting before we came to you, in January, we actually revised and updated the landscape plan. So the landscape plan is actually last revised January 31st, 2025. There was some confusion with our landscape consultant and the ordinance and interpretations of what we should be doing here. So we actually, if you're looking at the Arrow review letter in terms of the waivers that are requested, we actually withdrew a couple of those waivers. We are still proposing removal of more than 20% of the trees on the site, but they're primarily in existing parking areas and like around the courtyard. We're not talking about a true wooded lot in this instance. So it looked more dramatic, I would say, what we were doing than what we're doing now. So the waiver that we're requesting related to trees specifically, there are 66 existing trees on the site. We would be removing 50 of them, but we would be replacing them per your ordinance. And then we are also required to do other buffer, street trees, et cetera. So there would be a total of 142 new trees that would be planted on the property. So I did want to qualify that because if you look through Arrow's letter, it looks like we're requesting 2 waivers for landscaping, and we were able to eliminate one of those. We are requesting a few other waivers. There are 3 waivers listed in a waiver summary that we submitted on January 31st, which are also referenced in items 1, 2, and 3 in Arrow's review letter from December, which all relate to stormwater infiltration on the site. As this board is very familiar with, this area is a karst area, and so therefore we are requesting waiver not to do infiltration and to do managed release concept basins instead. Arrow does support these waiver requests. There's the 4th waiver that we're requesting on our list is a waiver not to do a full traffic study. The site was previously office, so we did do a trip generation analysis to demonstrate that general industrial use would be less on the site than office, and Bowman supports that waiver in their letter. They commented about, if it was going to be a warehouse use, to do something further, and that's why I wanted to clarify earlier that it could not be a warehouse use on the site. The 5th waiver that we are requesting pertains to sound and vibration study that was added to your ordinance related to the data center here. This use, we believe, it'll be similar to other things in the Great Valley Corporate Center, and certainly we can address that further at final plan if we have a specific user. And then finally, Zach had pointed out to us, there is a trail system that actually is partially on the site today and wraps around the back of the property through the corporate center, and we are proposing trail along the frontage and some modifications to trail as it connects to the driveway that's shown on the top part of the plan that's on the screen. And then we're also connecting it up to a portion of the building along Valley Stream Parkway. So because that trail exists today out there and sidewalk, we're proposing to match what's out there versus doing exactly what's in your ordinance today for multi-use trail, just so it all works together. And Zach had kindly pointed out that technically that would need a waiver to be consistent with what's out there today. So I do have Rick Stratton here from Chester Valley Engineers and Eric McHugh from Workspace if you have any specific questions about the site or what we're proposing.
My quick questions are,
Yeah.
this is a complete facelift of the site, correct?
Yes.
The
this
demo of the Siemens building.
Both buildings would
Both
be demoed.
buildings.
Yeah, they're two buildings. The site, this is actually two different lots today, so it would be consolidated. The one thing that I will say that we are retaining, there is a stormwater management basin that's along the frontage of Valley Stream Parkway. That is being retained. It'll be slightly modified grading in the back a little bit, but that will remain on the site. Otherwise, the rest of the site is a complete redevelopment.
Okay.
That I would say, and there are some existing trails, like I said, that sort of circle the property. We're making adjustments to them, but retaining that trail
Is the
system.
picture we're seeing, Zach, the current
And that's the
configuration?
Yeah.
That's
So
what I
you'll
thought.
see like there's a little courtyard in the center. For instance, there are a couple of trees in there that would be
Mhm.
removed, and then they're scattered throughout the parking lots, and that's where we're getting that tree removal from.
Understood. Is this increasing or decreasing impervious?
I think it ends up sort of net neutral, or is it actually less?
A slight increase.
Or a slight increase? Okay.
That's what it kind of looks like. That's
Yeah,
what I'm asking.
it's sort of, because of the way this lays out, it ends up, even though the square footage is smaller, it just ends up laying out that way.
It's a really big rectangle.
Yes. I mean, Workspace had looked at obviously various different options for the site over the past couple of years, and they know what's being leased right now, what's actually working in the corporate center today.
Mhm.
So, I mean, obviously, if they had a user for the office buildings,
Absolutely,
they would keep them. But
I'm no disagreement with the repurposing of the property. The questions for the impervious is kind of in the line of questioning towards the first waiver you're requesting, and if the engineer could address
Sure.
that
absolutely.
water quality runoff and how that's kind of being addressed, or why you're seeking a waiver when you're increasing impervious.
So, yes, the reason we're requesting a waiver is because the underlying geology here has karst in it. And so we are managing stormwater on the site for added impervious. We're doing so with a managed release concept. So rather than collecting the stormwater and letting it infiltrate into the ground, which is prone to sinkholes, we're collecting that water in large underground tanks, and we're slowly releasing it back out into the public storm drain system. So we're not necessarily infiltrating the volume back into the groundwater. We're slowly releasing it, which is an approved method by DEP and very common in the Great Valley Corporate Center.
And I know we can't predict for the future, but what levels of storms are these going to be help manage for? Like the 100-year storm, the 20-year storm? I kind of
Yeah, up to the 100-year storm. Yes, we're managing. We're reducing rates for storms up to the 100-year storm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any idea if a similar waiver was already granted for the existing facilities?
Most likely
Building?
not. They were
Yeah.
built in the 80s.
Okay.
So I think at that point there was not a requirement in your code for volume management,
Okay.
but there was rate management by the two ponds that were on the site.
Okay.
Yeah, that answers my questions. I personally don't have. That was my one issue with the waivers. The other ones I'm fine with, just to be clear of where I stand.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions and I don't have any issues with the new plan.
Same, I'm okay with it.
You want to make a motion?
Sure. Make a motion to, let's see, authorize solicitor to draft a resolution for decision LD 09-2024 for workspace industrial building at 55 and 65 Valley Stream Parkway preliminary plan.
Have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
And passes.
Thank you very much.
And we do apologize for having you have to come out for a second time.
Current buildings are not AAA rated.
We're still doing extension of time.
Yeah, so this one, at the meeting last month, and again, I apologize as well for some of the technical difficulties there. Last month, at the last month's meeting, we asked the applicant if they'd be willing to extend the deadline, the shot clock, so to speak, until April 30th to carry this into next month's meeting where the resolution you just authorized could be approved. So that's where this comes into play.
Okay, they're
This is
okay
for
with
the
that?
same project.
Okay,
Did we just authorize the resolution?
Yep.
so make a motion? Sure. Yes, I'd like to make a motion to extend the preliminary plan until, no, not, what am I extending, Zach?
You're extending the time in which the board has to render a decision,
Okay.
which gets a little wordy on the agenda, so it's
Did we render a
condensed.
decision?
We approved
The preliminary.
the issuance of the solicitor resolution.
Okay,
Next, when it exists, then we approve the resolution.
very good, okay. Well then, I'd like to make the motion to approve the preliminary plan until April 30th for LD-09-2024 for the workspace industrial building at 55 and 65 Valley Stream Parkway.
I'm locked out because that's on. And, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 I guess it's time for portable speakers. I think it's time. It's time. Rich, you want to make a motion for portable speakers? It's not on the agenda, but while we have it on Tuesday. Okay. Yeah.
Don't we have to make a motion to have a special meeting next week? After the hearing?
We
don't yet know the
day, I guess. Can we,
For the bonds? You're talking about for the bonds.
Yeah, for the
Yes.
hearing. Was it for the hearing?
It's
I'm
not,
going-
it's not continued. It'll be a brand new one and a new meeting. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Good question.
Yes.
and do we have to make a motion, or the advertising itself will be the scheduling?
I think it would be a good practice, so you announce it tonight, but you're not technically continuing it. You're gonna run a new advertisement
Sure.
for another meeting. But
Yeah.
yeah, it would be good to announce it if you've selected a date and time.
We don't, it'll either be Tuesday or Wednesday.
Yeah, so you won't know
So,
tonight.
No.
Yeah.
And we'll put it on the
Yeah, so,
township,
right, so it's not a
internet.
continued meeting, because you're not continuing to a
definitely
date
not.
certain.
Yeah.
But you're gonna re-advertise it.
Right.
Yeah.
You guys have been meeting in the morning on that, just getting it out of the way, or?
All right, Zach, if you want to do D, please.
Sure. So this item is to discuss and consider a motion to advertise a hearing on the following ordinance amendments. I'll note this was originally listed as a discussion of some items that staff had identified over the last few months that we felt should be moved forward in advance of the comprehensive zoning ordinance update that's currently underway. So that theme holds through here. What we are asking, if this board is comfortable with what's discussed here tonight, that we identify a date for a hearing in sometime mid to late April. Probably not we wouldn't be able to meet our advertising requirements for the standing April 9th meeting, but I understand there may be a conflict with that date. So somewhere between the regularly scheduled April board meeting and some dates here in mid to late April, which would allow these to move forward a little more expeditiously. Sort of at the end here, I guess I just want to note that we should identify a date if possible this evening. So if we can get to that, I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. The first item in here is to revise the code section that relates to the submission requirements for a conditional use application. What we've done here is to try to go through what is pretty limited in terms of submission requirements currently, consolidated the handful of bullet points into one or two about providing your name and signature on the applications, very boring administrative stuff. We still require a narrative description, the reasons for that the conditional use should be granted. What we have done is add items C through F. 1C being a description of any sort of covenants, easements, restrictive, or other restrictions that govern the development of the site in the case that there is actually a development as opposed to just a change of use. It just helps us understand what's at play with the site, things like cross-access, drainage easements, all sorts of things like that. We would require a conservation plan, which is outlined in the subdivision land development ordinance, and essentially that just provides more information on the existing conditions, streams, roadways, rights-of-way, wetlands, things like that, wooded areas. So just a better understanding of the existing. E is a site plan, which just outlines various components, the zoning data, existing or proposed buildings, parking areas, points of ingress, egress, landscaping, stormwater, just conceptual. Believe it or not, that's not a requirement in our current ordinance. And then also to require environmental impact assessment. So within that section of our SAUDO that this references, there's a number of different studies, traffic studies, environmental studies, fiscal studies. This just cross-references that entire section so that we have, again, as much information as we can when reviewing a conditional use. Oftentimes we get these anyway, sort of through the review process, but having them in the code, explicitly, I think makes sense and puts the board in a position to truly understand what's out at the property and what is proposed for the property.
I'd like to thank you and Bernadette and Catherine for putting this together. I know I've talked to you till I'm blue in the face about trying to make this improvement to help us with our understanding of all the comprehensive aspects of the conditional use at the front end, rather than having a piece in the front, a piece in the middle, and a piece in the back. And I think this will really help us moving forward, understanding the project. And it also helps the developer understand where we're coming from initially, so that at the last minute, we're not in a position to say, hey, we don't like this, and they've got to start all over again. So I think this is a really good step and a really good change. Thanks for putting it together.
Sure.
Agreed. The more communication, the better.
Yeah, and it's helpful to not to wait till we're done the entire zoning review ordinance, which has been in process for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Nice to do it in piecemeal. Yeah.
Yeah, this will help in the case that we have a new submission. In the meantime, we'll have more information at that time. Okay. So I'll just continue on to the second one here, if that's all right. This is kind of generically on here. It's definitions and permitted uses in our office, mixed use, and industrial districts. So there's two pieces of this. There's the definitions, and then there's the permitted uses component. There are a number of new definitions, some that you might think would be defined, but which are not. And our thought process, sort of, especially with these next two, is given some of the, I'll say, inconsistencies within our ordinance, things that you think would be defined but are not, different types of uses, and given all of the things going on in the office market locally, it makes sense to provide more clarity for owners, operators, potential purchasers, as the case may be, as to what these different uses are, what's permitted where, et cetera. So there's a couple, I'll hit these at a pretty high level here. I'm happy to discuss any in particular and just add a little commentary with each. So the first is accessory structure, believe it or not a defined term in our ordinance, just accessory use, which is pretty generic. The idea here is just to differentiate the two because there are different things that relate to each of them, setbacks and other types of dimensional requirements, things like that. We do not currently have a definition of heavy manufacturing in our ordinance. We have a description in our use tables, in this case for the industrial district, that says, it sort of reads like a heavy industry definition, but it's really just like a long narrative thing in our table, unlike most things in our use table, which is like office, retail, research and development, things like that. So clarifying that, it's very consistent with that language. The heavy manufacturing is permitted in our industrial district. Light manufacturing, similarly, it's just kind of in there described in the use table. This is very similar and just adds a little more clarity as to the differences between heavy and light. Light manufacturing is permitted in our office business park district, which is a very large district in the township, and our industrial district. The next is a definition of office, which again, believe it or not, is not defined, but is sort of one of these building block type definitions. It's referenced in other definitions. It's referenced in various use tables. So we thought it made sense to provide a very simple definition for that. Research and development, similarly to light manufacturing, is a permitted use in our office, business park, and industrial district. There is no definition for that. So we thought it made sense to add some clarity as to what those types of activities are or would be, could be. Storage, outdoor. So you'll see a trend here. There are a number of different definitions that relate to storage, warehouse, self-storage. Some of these play off each other, and the idea is to kind of better differentiate between the two because the way they're currently in the ordinance is just, in my opinion, not as clear as it could or should be. Outdoor storage essentially just, it's a very generic one, but it adds a reference to the section of our code that regulates outdoor storage, the types of things that can be regulated, the requirements for screening, process for approval, etc. We added a definition of temporary, which is relevant to a number of things, somewhat related to storage, but also things like dwellings and hotels, which I'll get to as I go down through here. Accessory use has been consolidated based on what's currently in the ordinance to simplify it and to align it with the accessory structure definition that I mentioned earlier. Dwelling unit is another building block type definition. It's referenced in different requirements, like different types of dwellings that are permitted throughout the township. We are clarifying here that these are really intended to be like permanent or semi-permanent residences when compared to the next one, hotel, motel, inn, which is very basic in our current definition. And we've added some, I would say, better specificity on the length of stays, the types of facilities that are, allowed to be within a hotel or motel or inn. And we've clarified that the length of stay should not be more than 30 days. So again, all of these are really more relevant to new projects coming in. We know that we have extended stay hotels. We know that we have all types of different hotels, but we felt it needed to be better clarified what is a dwelling, what is a hotel, and updating these definitions. Storage, similarly, that's an existing definition. There are a number of things, it's basically just a keeping of new or used merchandise, materials, etc. This is a building block definition that is referenced in some of the other ones that I'll just get to. Importantly, within this definition, there are a couple of exceptions, things that would not count as storage, so to speak. And that's really just a way of clarifying that for these exceptions that are outlined, they don't trigger some of these other ordinance requirements, like the outdoor storage requirements that I sort of loosely referenced. Two that have been added here are display of inventory related to otherwise permitted motor vehicle sales, watercraft sales, lawn and garden centers, etc. You're essentially storing all sorts of things outside for those inherently because of the use. So it doesn't make sense to apply the same restrictions as would otherwise apply to storage, outdoor storage in particular. Similarly, we have added warehouse or logistics and fulfillment centers, which I'll get to more specifically in these next few and in the next ordinance. We didn't think it made sense. We have listed these as accepted from this definition of a storage to the extent that the specific operations of those facilities conflict with the aspect of storage which states that things would be stored for a period of greater than 8 hours. It may be that some of those things, those types of facilities, are longer or shorter periods of time. So we just wanted to make sure that they're not really being regulated in the exact same way as those other types of things that these various definitions regulate. The next is a existing but improved definition of storage, self-service. So this is, self-storage, things that we see everywhere. There are existing ones along Route 30. A lot of those got there through some other way. It's not a permitted use along Route 30. It is a permitted use described a little more generically, similar to some of the other ones I described earlier. This is to clarify how those types of facilities would operate, to differentiate them again from some of these other categories, which I'll get to. And then later, there's a little more clarity on as to where they're permitted. Next one here is a definition of warehouse. Current definition of warehouse is very minimal, very dated, and it is, I'll just read this one to you because it's so short. A building used primarily for storage of goods and materials. That is it. That's the only thing that's in our ordinance currently. We have clarified that here, and again, to better differentiate between self-storage and what I'll talk about as a fulfillment center in the next ordinance. I'm just going to read this one because I think it's important to help to differentiate. A building or portion thereof, which is used primarily for the temporary or long-term indoor storage of goods and materials related to the principal use of a property, including but not limited to office, retail, manufacturing, research and development, or otherwise permitted use. Warehouses are not open to the public for retail sales and shall have limited truck traffic. Self-service storage facilities shall not be considered warehouses. Again, the idea here differentiating between what was previously a very basic, not very descriptive use. One thing to note here is that this mentions principal use. What I'll talk about shortly is that oftentimes these warehouses, which you hear of as flex buildings, the idea behind a flex building is that there's multiple different types of uses in many cases, and there's not partitions and things like that that interrupt sort of the flow of space. Now, I'm sure the folks from Workspace and others could give a much better definition, but the intent here is that you can have a warehouse as part of any other permitted use. The idea is to just better distinguish between a standalone warehouse, which has a very different operation and impact than a self-storage facility or, which I'll get to again, fulfillment center. Second part of this ordinance is to clarify that warehouse would be an accessory use permitted in the office business park district, industrial district, and frontage commercial district when, as I've mentioned here, operating in support of another otherwise permitted use. I'm paraphrasing. There is an important note here. Where an accessory warehouse is larger in terms of gross floor area than the principal use it supports, a special exception from the zoning hearing board shall be required. So again, these are, they're permitted as part of other operations, but for ones that are very large, that would potentially have a larger impact, the special exception required, for new ones coming in, would help to better understand what the impacts are and to better, adjust the approvals, things like that, based on that fact. So here under the next part of this sort of like large chunk of different modifications to the ordinance here is related to the permitted uses. We currently have a phrase that as a permitted use in the industrial district called truck terminal. It may be that that was related to warehousing. It's not a defined term. We're proposing to remove it from the table of permitted uses. We are proposing to change the existing permitted uses in the industrial district. What currently outlines warehousing and distributing, including storage of personal household goods, proposing to remove that from the table of permitted uses and essentially replace it with warehouse parentheses accessory and self-service storage facility. So again, just trying to differentiate between these various things and describe where they're permitted. In the industrial district, we have a permitted use described as accessory office uses. We are proposing to change that to office uses as a permitted use. So removing the accessory aspect, there's no reason why somebody couldn't have an office in the industrial district. Oftentimes there would be another permitted use that's all within that table, whether it's office and R&D, office and warehouse, office and manufacturing. These are things you see in common all the time. Next is a modification to the table of permitted uses in the office mixed use districts for the office and business park and office business park service districts, which would allow medical offices, medical clinics, specialty hospitals within those areas. We feel like these are uses that are appropriate for that district. There will be others as we go through the zoning process that we identify that should be permitted in various parts of the what I'll call the corporate center at large. These are ones that we feel confident at this time. We understand what they are, and we feel that they should be permitted in a wider area of the township. And the last one here is similarly changing the permitted uses for the office business park, Great Valley Revitalization Overlay, and frontage commercial FC districts to allow warehouse parentheses accessory. So in the corporate center, it's a different animal. It's related to research and development, light manufacturing. In the FC district, it's more related to things like retail, like a loading dock on the back of a shopping center, as an example. I know it was a lot. I thought it was good to just at least walk through that so everyone knew what the moving pieces were and then how that flows into the next one. So if there are questions, I'm happy to talk more than I already am, or I can flow into the third one that's on the agenda. Is that the preference? I might need a drink of water. The third one here is establishment of a logistics and fulfillment center overlay, LFCO. This essentially is intended to further distinguish between these various types of warehouse and distribution that were previously very limited in their definition and their distinction. So this would establish an overlay sort of in the northeast portion of the township in the Atwater Corporate Center, which is very close to the Turnpike slip ramp. And essentially the idea here is to identify the areas that are most appropriate for those types of facilities, logistics and fulfillment centers, being that those are the types of facilities that accept, package, redistribute goods, materials, et cetera, to other places. So it's their business is bringing stuff in and sending it back out in different vehicles, right? That's the basic idea, versus a warehouse, which is essentially tied to another use, which I think is much more common throughout the township and beyond. So the idea here is to ensure access to our major arterial roadways, reduce traffic on local and distributor roadways, including portions of the corporate center, but elsewhere, and to the extent practical, minimize impacts on the surrounding properties. So there are a handful of properties in the Atwater Corporate Center, again, near the, I'm going sequentially down through the ordinance here. We identified them. There's an exhibit in the proposed ordinance that highlights them. And essentially what this overlay does is to permit logistics and fulfillment centers subject to certain criteria and supplemental standards. There are a handful of supplemental standards and criteria. One is a minimum gross lot area of not less than 10 acres, so larger tracts for larger buildings and operations. There's a requirement that increases the setbacks by 50% of the otherwise applicable standard. So if the setback is 50, it would now have to be 75. And that's really as a means to kind of insulate these properties from their surroundings. There's a parking requirement that I feel is very conservative based on industry standards, is 1 per 500 square feet as opposed to 1 per 300, which require a lot more parking, and 1 per loading dock or for trucks or other vehicles. There is a caveat in here that the parking requirements can be reduced with based on supplemental data, whether it's ITE or other data that's found acceptable to the board and the traffic engineer. There's a reduced building height from the otherwise applicable 42 feet to 35 feet. And there's a clarification, and there's certain parts of the corporate center where there's footnotes in the table that allow the height to be increased in various ways by either reducing impervious or because of how things are calculated, because of the surrounding topography. This would essentially disqualify these types of uses from those types of incentives to go taller, that is. There's a requirement that loading docks and the circulation and other facilities be oriented away from the main road where you take access. So put your loading docks and parking areas to the side and rear. Similarly, with the actual staging of materials, they also have to be located away from the front yard. There will be a requirement for some additional screening, such as screening like landscaping, fences, berms, and things like that to minimize the visual impact. There are requirements for adequate staging and queuing areas, and there are requirements related to architecture just to break up the facade of these buildings. They tend to be very large, sort of monolithic buildings, so things like windows, varying of colors and materials, goes a long way in kind of breaking up the mass of the building. So then the last piece within that ordinance, this ordinance document, is a definition of logistics and fulfillment centers, which I won't read here, but essentially the idea is that it differentiates from the other warehouse use in that the idea is it's a central hub of processing, receiving, and redistributing goods and materials to various entities. And it's distinguished from a warehouse as defined in this chapter, which is what I outlined earlier. So I know it was a lot. Thought it was good to at least walk through those. These are ones, as I said, that some of them are things that probably should already be in our ordinance. Some of them reflect what I would say as a township feel is the changing nature of warehouse, the changing nature of retail, e-commerce, and all the things that go into why those types of facilities have evolved over the last few years. And we just felt like our current ordinance standards just weren't quite adequate in that regard. So that's the high
I
level.
would just add kind of in a different narrative. It just this really does allow us to be more proactive rather than reactive by using these best practices to kind of direct the fulfillment centers to an area in the township's infrastructure that can really best handle the impact that these facilities can have on a township, as we've seen in other areas. And so I think this is another good move. Again, thank you for that. Peter, I think you're...
Yeah, I just agree.
Agreement?
Any further clarification on ordinance definitions is better for everybody, for developers, for us as supervisors, for the planning commission and zoning hearing board, just so everyone's on the same page easily. So yeah, thank you for this.
Yeah, echo that. That was a lot of work. That was, hope you didn't do this late at night.
No comment.
Okay.
He did it last weekend.
Okay, but thank you. It's very helpful.
Yeah, it is. Okay. Any questions pertaining to this? Okay. So I think okay. So we want a motion to advertise, but we don't quite have the date. So
Yeah.
how do we handle that, Bernadette?
Well, I guess the question becomes, are we looking for a?
Next month. It has to be the 30 day.
We have to have 30 days, so we can't make it April because we're meeting too soon on April 9th, and today's the 10th already. Well, we need a little more time because we got to get it out. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we need a little more time than 30 days, just because logistically you got to get it out to the owner on the one that where their property's having the overlay put on it. Get to the libraries and the planning commission, things like that. Right. So.
Just as an example, if these were sent out to the planning commissions and like the 30-day clocks initiated,
Yeah.
the soonest we could have a hearing would be Sunday, April 13th. Something tells me that's not what you guys had in mind for that day. So probably anytime the week of the 14th of April or the following week. And it's still, the idea being, and we try to do these things at the regular meetings, but the next meeting isn't until mid-May. So if there was a desire to move them forward sooner, anytime after the 14th would be fine.
If we shift May, instead of having that same week of when it would have, instead of having the same week April 14th. Okay, 14th, 15th, 17th. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday,
Yep.
if that helps.
And the following week, I believe, is I already can't do math. 22nd or 23rd. Do any of those dates work as well? I know it's never fun to compare schedules here, but that probably would be the simplest way to get a date in mind.
Both are fine for me, 22nd, 23rd. 14, 15, 17, 22, 23rd. Okay.
I'll keep it simple.
We'll get to the 20, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have clarified that. 23rd is the Planning Commission. So I did not mean to mean so it's the week of the 14th, 15th, or 17th, preferably. 21st, 22nd, 24th.
It's instead of the 9th to the 14th.
Yes, are you good on the 14th?
Yes.
Yeah, when we had, it sounded like there may be some scheduling issues with the meeting on the 9th. We thought it might make sense, if possible, to consolidate them. If not, it could be a standalone night. But, why meet twice if you don't have to, I guess was our thought.
The problem with Rich is not going to be here on the 9th.
Yeah, I'm out of town on the 9th.
Right.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't allow these to move forward in like the shortest time frame either. So that's why if the thought was to already potentially reschedule that, let's consolidate the two,
So-
was the thinking.
So let's target the 14th unless anybody in staff has a birthday or, can't make it.
I cannot make that. I already have another township meeting that night,
Really?
but
My calendar says I turn 85 that week, so I Monday the 14th? All right.
That's fine. That's the fire board.
It is a fire board.
Well, okay.
And the dates the following week, I mean, I'm not trying to complicate
yeah,
things here, but
I
the
actually
following week
would
is
give
probably.
yourself a little bit more time because literally Friday's the 14th.
Yep, I understand.
You got a lot to do tomorrow.
It's better than Friday the 13th. Is the 21st or 22nd, is that possible?
Okay. Can you do the 15th? You said yes.
I can do 15th.
Would the 15th help you out? A little bit. Just a little bit? How much? You okay? Canceling your cruise, you're coming in.
If it's the 16th, we'd have to just adjust the Historic Commission meeting. Does the 21st, Monday the 21st?
It's very historical on the 16th. Now, the 15th, I'd rather shoot for.
How about the 7th? How about the 17th?
I can't the
Yeah,
17th.
okay.
7, she said, not 17.
She said 17th.
So let's make a motion for April 15th at 6:30. Do I have a second?
For a hearing and the board meeting, you're saying?
Yes. The whole,
Yeah, let's make that clear for the board meeting and these ordinances.
Yes.
Okay.
both. All in favor? Aye. April 15th.
All right, so no meeting on the 9th then.
Okay, John.
Thank you. For the month of March, there is no zoning hearing board activity. We have 2 pending applications that may be heard in April. Under updates, the golf station at 562 Lancaster Avenue across from Plain Book remains in limbo due to a non-sale at the recent sheriff's sale. The golf vendor has stepped up and has made some voluntary repairs at the location and has agreed to assist us in the upkeep of the parcel as they're actively trying to return it to operating condition. So the owners are out of the picture for now. Today, we condemned a property on King Road after assisting an elderly tenant who is now safe in temporary housing. The property was condemned as it was an unregistered rental with numerous code violations, making it uninhabitable. Also involved now are the DEP and Chester County Health due to some issues in the building, and they're cooperating with us and, of course, us them. The owner is an absentee landlord residing in Florida that is being notified by mail today. That's it for the month.
Person being displaced, they someplace safe to go to?
Yeah, they're in a hotel in West Whiteland for now. They were originally with family in New Jersey and finally got to come in to, we inspected it, went through the house. She has a lot of experts that came and did surveys and stuff, and she has a hearing in April 3rd in front of the judge in Exeter.
Okay. Thanks, John. Next, we will move to the public comment section. So anything that we did not speak about can be brought up at this point in time. Anyone from the audience? Good. We'll have a 2 to 3 minute conversation for public comment. I hear we need a new mic.
Good evening again.
Martin, do you think we need a new mic?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
There it
I strongly
is.
encourage it because
All right.
last month
You're overriding Peter.
I agree. Last month there was a presentation on the plastic bag ordinance, and the woman was trying her best. She had great exhibits and all, but she was turning and this and that. It was just
It's hard.
gibberish. It was really hard to follow, and it's not the first time that something happened. So, that being said, I would like to speak to something that I had a problem with. I was on the Zoom call last month, and I had a problem with, and that's the MS4. And with technical difficulties, the exhibits that were presented here weren't being shown. It sounds like a gang, doesn't it? MS4. But they weren't being shown to the Zoom attendees. Now, Donna was kind enough to provide me with the exhibits, and I'd just like to make a couple really brief comments and a suggestion. I was somewhat surprised to see the number of mature trees that were being removed, greater than 18-inch diameter. I think it was approximately 50. That really surprised me. And then there was a statement in the presentation that said this is the presentation being the extensive regrading, what have you, the 3 areas of the Chester Valley or the Valley Creek stream throughout the township. And it said this is the most cost-effective alternative. I thought about that a minute. I said, well, first of all, I didn't see any other alternatives presented for comparison. And then I said to myself, well, 50 mature trees, 18 inches, breast height, diameter, probably some of them are even bigger. That was the minimum. What's the cost of a tree? What's the value of a tree? And I think that should be taken into account. Not that we can change what's been done, but going forward, I think when you're talking about 50 mature trees, and I went over to the park and saw some of them, that has a value, and I don't think you can just say, cost effective, dollars and cents. I think you have to attach some value to that type of thing in the township. It lends a lot to the quality of life. All right, that comment being said, one of the things I noticed with the ecology park was that was one of the areas being impacted. And you can see this from the Mill Lane 202 bridge, if you look at it, particularly the northeast corner of the park. You have all manner of dead ash trees because of the emerald ash borer. I counted 40 and I stopped counting. I said, there's really a very big one in there, several feet in diameter. And other areas have had problems with these ash trees. A lot's been in the news about Radnor Township and the actions they've taken. Cheese Hever College, Villanova College, they've all had problems. The Tyler Arboretum, they closed, according to the news, 11 miles of trails to remove dead ash trees. And they're somewhat a dangerous tree. As I mentioned earlier, the wood chip trail along Mill Lane is sort of blocked now because a number of dead ash trees have fallen on it. So my suggestion, well, first of all, I think the township should assess all its park to determine, the extent of the problem, and also determine what trees, if any, have to be come down, because they're dangerous in nature. They just fracture and fall. I remember last month what I heard on the Zoom call is that there was some feeling that there'd be excess trees for the replanting of those 3 Valley Creek areas that were being impacted. My suggestion would be, before we say, well, let's go plant them somewhere else in the township, the ecology park, if based on your assessment, is really that negatively impacted because of all the dead ash trees, that maybe you should take some of those excess trees for replanting and put them into the ecology park itself. So.
Sounds logical.
Yeah. I mean, personally, on my property, my son can speak to it. We've taken down 60, 70 ash trees. Just the emerald borer just devastated them. Yeah.
It's not cost effective to try and treat them. Just take them down.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what they recommend.
It's the simple fact.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the wood market, the timber market, is really bad for ash trees right now.
You got a lot of firewood. That's what you got.
Yeah, exactly. There are my comments. Thank you.
Catherine, Zach, is there any chance to get our engineers to reevaluate some of those 50 trees and still meet the requirements under MS4? Or John?
Touch that thing.
Oh, go ahead, John.
You're fine. We could talk to them. We're already in that process of final approval, so it's going to be very difficult. And a lot of those trees are going because of the drastic grade changes out there to create floodplain. They're sitting up too high. So to try and recontour everything to try and save some of those trees, it's going to be a dramatic change to the plan that's already almost at final approval.
So I guess, to kind of feed off of what Martin was saying is there really a purpose for taking down 50 trees?
Yeah, I think you remember we called this out from the very beginning that there were going to be some areas where a lot of trees were going to come out.
Yeah.
Right. When you go out there and you look at the banks, you have some areas they have huge cuts where the stream is cut into the banks. They're trying to taper everything to create floodplain. And if you just leave these trees sticking up in the air, it's only a matter of time they're going to be dead. They're going to get washed out. The grades won't work.
Anyway.
Right. They're going to be sitting up too high to make all those grades work.
Right.
So, yeah, I remember from the very beginning, it was that dramatic look. We said there's major trees that are going to be cut. And there was a lot of trees going back in. And you're not putting back that size of tree. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
No. And this is directly due to the MS4 program and regulations.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
Right. It's going to cost us over,
Yeah,
every 5 years, $2 couple $1 million.
Yeah, we'd prefer to not take these out and do
Right.
something different. The newest plans, Peter was at the lunch or the breakfast the other day. It's a lot different. These stream banks, it's going to go more towards flood control than this sediment and stream restoration. But this is the cycle we're in right now, and these are the approved projects. So
The next cycle has a much different focus of the permit. So, and stream bank restoration is not an option. So this will not be the experience during the next permit cycle.
That's each 5-year period.
That's
over
right.
5 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's the focus in the next budget?
Volume management.
Volume management.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to build dams now? Dams.
well, the problem is the volume was eroding all these streams. So if you can slow the volume or control the volume and the speed of the water, that's going to take care of your problems that we're trying to fix with these stream banks. Because
we're fixing stream banks that are damaged from flooding. We're not doing anything to stop the flooding. But this is the way the DEP directed everybody and kind of coerced you into doing this right now. I think they've seen the flaw in that plan, and now they're trying to change what people are going to be doing.
And how are we supposed to stop the flow or slow the flow except by digging basins somewhere where we do or do not have land to do it?
Right, exactly.
Right?
So it gets very expensive again, especially in a township like ours where we have high ground to low ground and control, forced onto the railroad tracks.
Yeah, Rich, we bring in beavers and let them dam it up.
I mean, they're not going to force us to go like a developer who goes underground storage. That is so crazy expensive.
Yeah,
we'll say no, forget it.
They haven't given their final what they're going to be and what the projects, but there's going to be, engineers are going to be evaluating what the projects are going to be and what it's going to take to achieve these goals for this next cycle. So,
Going into this next cycle, are we in a better position to maybe steer them? Convince them?
Yeah, we can work with property owners. We've already reached out to a few large property owners that are willing to work with us on some projects. There's a lot of different things. Slowing down the volumes, also larger floodplains, areas where the water will just slow down instead of keeping the speed going through. So.
Okay. All right. Martin, I think it's got to follow up. Yeah, really.
I think my question's been answered, but yeah, the next cycle, I think we should, again, put more value on the environmental impact in terms of the trees. But just by way of background information, you're talking about volume for the next cycle. If you look at the ecology park versus some of the historic maps, you'll find that where 202 is and on the north side of the park, it used to be watercress fields. Just by way of information, which basically it's a wet, lower area, so it's curious.
Okay. Good conversation. Moving on to consent agenda. I will read its entirety, and it's pretty large, but I will be excluding item D and reading and voting on that separately. Okay? So, consent agenda, approve the meeting minutes from February 12th, 2025. Ratify the payment of bills in the amount of $672,374.28. The treasurer report. E, approve the Dandelions digital proposal for assistance with the plastic bag ordinance in the amount of $2,500. Approve.
Can I ask Catherine on that? Or is that, who's that to? Yeah. So that's in addition to what we pay them?
I'm sorry, I can't recall.
It is, Peter, it is. It's in addition.
How? It seems like a worthwhile fund, but how do we have to pay them? Don't be scared, Donna.
I am scared.
That is a good question. So as part of our engagement with them, they have an optional large-scale campaign part of their contract where as we need their help with initiatives that require surveys and gathering information and building out like sections of the website, very topical things like that are a bigger lift, they have this set rate that we can engage them for specifically for those items. And so this is our first time looking to use them for more of a large scale project. And they do have a background in helping other municipalities with this. They just finished Media Boroughs campaign that wrapped in 2023. So I found them to be very knowledgeable and helpful and frankly, a very good value for the $2,500 of what the service they're going to provide.
Okay. What website are you talking about?
It'd be the township website, but there's be like a
I thought you meant like a
dedicated
new
page.
township website.
We are getting a new township website.
I've heard that a long time ago.
It's coming very soon.
I've heard that a lot too.
Okay, moving on to F, approve Child's engineering proposal for Sidley Road and Mill Lane Underwater Bridge inspection for $6,900.
Is this an out-of-pocket, or is this get covered under federal grant funding, or if it does need repair, would that be covered under federal grant funding?
This would be out of the township's pocket, and any repairs would also not be covered under the grant. This would be above and beyond that current scope of work.
That's why Catherine asked me if I was interested in putting on a wetsuit and going down there.
That's alternative too, is Scott can put on a scuba suit.
So, but I declined.
I'm just. I'm.
Wait, he's
the reason I'm
certified.
asking is, I'm so anxious to see this project done.
Sure.
I'm
Understood.
not looking to add cost to it, and if it means punting it down the road, I'd rather punt it down the road, personally.
You don't know what you're going to find. If you find something not adequate, then it would be a mistake to do the project. So, and $6,900 is not.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I know. Hopefully, it's money not wasted, but wasted. Confirmed that the bridge is acceptable.
Is it
I don't know
is
where.
it a can of worms?
I can't
Rich?
imagine where you have to scuba dive under that bridge anyway. I don't know where he's talking about, but there's
That's
got to be.
my point.
I mean, it just
Maybe a snorkel.
maybe, yeah, goggles, yes.
Goggles, snorkel.
I agree.
Scott.
I haven't walked over there, but I can't imagine it's deep enough that you need to scuba. But we'll find out.
Understood.
Okay, G, approve the Arrow proposal not to exceed $47,250 for the MS4 compliance services for 2025.
Hopefully, last question. Where is Arrow?
This evening.
They're online?
This evening, yeah.
Okay. All right. They used to show up. I remember that. Way back when.
This is actually just the first month that they have not been able to attend in person. So.
Approve the first payment application from Jurish Construction for the Warren Avenue culvert replacement in the amount of $362,142.85. John, just out of curiosity, when's it targeted that would be finished by? Somebody was asking me and I just didn't know.
It's going to be the end of the month. We'll have it open.
End of the month.
And
Okay.
the road repaving is going to be in our paving project this year.
Okay.
So
Great, thanks. Moving on to I, approve the first payment application from Armour and Sons for the Route 401 traffic signal project in the amount of $248,076. Approve the
This
quote.
sounds like a dream coming true here, John. Is this happening? Are the traffic signals on 401 going to make sense now?
they're basically all the physical work's done. It's all the programming now. So they're getting close, and they're not working. They're working well. I haven't.
They are working well. I shouldn't complain, but
Our
historically
major
they
complaints
haven't.
have gone away here at Mill.
Yeah.
So they seem to be working better than what
They do. I'm dwelling on the past. Sorry about that.
No problem.
J, approve the quote from Certainty Roofing. I don't know if it's Certainty Roofing for the Valley Creek Park House roof replacement in the amount of $13,200, plus the cost of plywood replacement of $75 per sheet, determined after the shingles are removed. I know John and his crew has been taking care of that roof for many years, so I guess it's time for specialist in there. K, approve purchase of a thermoplastic paint application equipment from Sherwin-Williams for the amount of $38,579 $1,000,000.90 underneath the CoStars program. Approve the purchase of a paving roller from Groff Tractor for $71,400, also underneath the CoStars program. Approve to place the order for a Ford F-550 utility truck, including all uplift costs, in the amount of $115,000, and that's also underneath the CoStars program. Approve agreement with Workspace for permission to park vehicles on One County View Road property for the summer concert series and movie night in Valley Creek Park. Consider waiver of township park policy related to alcohol for the Renaissance Fair and the summer concert series in Valley Creek Park. Movie would be looked at a different time. Consider approval to enter into an agreement for the township indemnification with Locust Lane Brewery, Honey Lane Winery, and the Philadelphia Mead Company to permit sales of alcohol at the Renaissance Fair and the summer concert series in Valley Creek Park. Q, consider approval to enter into agreement with Rising Sun Presents for East Whiteland Summer Concert Series for a price not to exceed $25,000 to pay for production costs, bands, and talent, and all sound and lighting needs, as the comparison last year was about $22,000. Okay. And under R, approve the payment to Rising Sun Presents for summer concerts in the amount of $7,000. Don, any questions on Zoom? Public? Would you like to make a motion?
Do we have to include the item E before making the motion?
No, that'll be a separate one.
I'll make a motion to approve the March 12th, 2025 consent agenda as read, with the exception of letter D being read.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Rich, would you be so kind, or Peter, would you be so kind to read consent agenda item D, as I have to recuse myself from this?
Oh, sure. Okay, motion to ratify supervisor letter requesting participation in township group life, health, hospitalization, medical services, and accident insurance plans. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And Scott's abstains, I guess, right? Okay, great.
Abstain. Okay. Very good. And that is a wrap, folks, at a couple minutes before 9. Thank you, everyone. Good night.